get started, and anybody who joins late can always take a peek at the recording for anything that they've missed. My name is Kirsten. I am the kind of Rotary relationship steward with the Rotary Clubs of Calgary on the Community Hubs Initiative. Many of you would be familiar, but for those who aren't, the Community Hubs Initiative is a partnership between the City of Calgary, Rotary Clubs of Calgary, and United Way of Calgary and area to focus on social inclusion, ultimately reducing poverty in our city. I'm really excited today. We have Sarah Wood here. Deb Heimers will be introducing her shortly. So we have Sarah, who's going to speak a bit about youth programming in Calgary. And then we'll have some kind of space and time for questions at the end of her presentation as they come. And then Howie's going to facilitate a group discussion following those questions. So before we get started, in the spirit of reconciliation, I just wanted to honor this land as Treaty 7 territory and the traditional lands of the Blackfoot Confederacy. I would also like to recognize the Métis people and the Inuit people who have made their home here in Mohkinstsis, also known as Calgary. I want to welcome anybody who's new on this call. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those who aren't new, welcome back. We also have some special guests that I wanted to highlight. So Kelly Campbell is here from the Youth Services section of the Calgary Police Services. Hi, Kelly. We also have Dixie Taylor, who's the Manager of Children and Youth Initiatives at United Way. Jenna Ramp, many of you know her already, our Community Hubs liaison. Who else am I missing? Karen's with the Rotary Employment Partnership. Any others? Many Rotarians. Awesome. Okay, well, with that, I am going to say thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll pass it over to Deb Heimers, founder of InStep and member of the Rotary Club of Calgary, SARC, to welcome our presenter.
Thanks, Kirsten. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Good, okay. Well, it is indeed my pleasure to welcome Sarah Wood, a success coach with Trellis. Trellis is the combination of Boys and Girls Club of Calgary and Aspen, and is part of All In for Youth program. Sarah's been part of the All In for Youth program since 2016 and has served in 3 schools between the Calgary Catholic and the Calgary Board of Education school districts in her role as success coach. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from York University in Toronto, Bachelor of Social Work from U of T, and will be undertaking a master's program in clinical social work at U of C in May 2021. Driven to improve the lives of youth and help them find meaning and purpose, Sarah is a determined and forthright advocate for her program and its participants. I had the pleasure of listening to Sarah's story back at a United Way monthly meeting, and it really struck a chord, Sarah, with me. So I'm so glad that you're here to share your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deb. I'm not sure if I'm on a bit of a lag because it's seeing on camera that you've stopped speaking, but I really appreciate that. I had never written a bio before. Kirsten said, "Do you have a bio?" And so I'm glad that that was meaningful. I did very much enjoy. I got to speak at the President's panel back in, I want to say, October or November, and it was a really wonderful experience. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with the Rotary Clubs today. It's a wonderful honor to be here, and I'm really excited to speak with you all about the All In for Youth program and my role within it as a success coach. I have never presented via Zoom before. This is my first time on Zoom. That's not true. I've used Zoom quite a bit, but I've never presented on Zoom before. So bear with me if we have some technical difficulties. I do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to try and pull up if I can share my screen, and we'll just see how this goes for a moment. So bear with me. I'm going to give this a shot. It says the host disabled participant screen sharing. Kirsten, can you help me out?
For sure. Howie, are you the host of this meeting? Or do you have host abilities? Do you know Howie? Or is Craig on the line?
It's sometimes a little confusing and anyway.
Howie, do you know? Are
Well,
you, I think you might be host.
I don't know that I am host, but sometimes Craig has it set up so that you can screen share anyway.
What might also work, Sarah, is if you put your presentation into the chat and everybody can follow along as an interim solution.
Sure, I
Yeah,
will
is
put
it-
the file in there.
Sorry about that. We have
Right.
emailed Craig, but I am not very savvy with this either.
That's all right. Flexibility is the name of the game, isn't it?
Well, just
Especially
in
in
the
these
bottom center of your screen, does it say?
My postal code.
Yeah, so I've got that green button says share screen. Unfortunately, when I click it, it says it's been disabled by the host, but I'm going to try and upload it as the file into the chat and we'll see how it goes.
Thanks, Sarah, for adapting there.
Okay, so it says it's sending. All right, so it says it's sent successfully. Great.
Perfect. So everybody will see in the chat a little box that says AIFY presentation. If you just click on it, you can download it and have it open on your screen to follow along.
Fantastic. I'm going to open the file myself as well, just so I have my slides big in front of me because I enjoy that.
Okay, it's
Now we'll get underway.
050.
And Bill Quinney, can we ask you to mute your mic? Thank you.
Okay.
INB is in there.
So I'll give a moment just to let processing speeds of computers kind of catch up. But when you open that file, you should see a green slide. That's my first slide. And so we'll get underway in just 15 seconds. Okay. All right, I didn't count. Thumbs up. Are we all right? All right, fantastic. Okay, well, I'm going to say once again, thank you so much to everyone for having me here today. As you can see on my title page, when I was thinking about what I wanted to speak about today, I didn't want to do the All for Youth 101 presentation that I've given a million times. Kirsten had alluded to the merger that my agency has just gone through. I am now working for Trellis. I had been employed by Boys and Girls Clubs of Calgary from 2015 onward, with the All for Youth program since 2016. Since last summer, now we are Trellis after the merger with Aspen Families. And so I thought, I'd really love to talk about what success coaching has looked like within the All for Youth program in 2021, as we've navigated the challenges of pandemic, as we've navigated mergers, as we've navigated the ongoing change that our city continues to experience in terms of economics, population, diversification, and everything that has been an element in our world in the last little while. I'm going to move through this, and to keep you following along with me, I'll let you know when I transition from slide to slide. The words I'm going to be speaking to you, I don't really read off a slide. I tend to speak relatively informally, so you'll see that my topics move with the slides, but I'm not going to, it's not rote. It's not just reading off a page. So we're going to move on from that title page now to slide number 2, which is a bit of 101 background about the All for Youth program. So the All for Youth program was founded by United Way in 2012 after looking at the dropout rate in Calgary schools and thinking, we'd really love to have an initiative that's going to combat this. And so they brought together a number of agency partners, community partners at that time, to work together under one big umbrella. And so my role as a success coach is part of that umbrella. It's one element of that umbrella. And it is certainly the most school-facing part in that our staff are embedded in select Calgary schools. But the All for Youth program is far bigger than me and far bigger than my staff team. Our partners include the Calgary Board of Education, the Calgary Secondary School District, the Youth Employment Center, who you may be familiar with from their wonderful hiring fairs and all the work that they do with youth 16 to 24. Junior Achievement Southern Alberta, who puts on incredible events such as World of Choices. The YMCA, which hosts absolutely high quality, wonderful math tutoring for our youth. Big Brothers Big Sisters, which just recently has kind of moved outside the funding envelope of All for Youth, but we're still very closely linked to them for mentorship for our youth. Trellis, of course, which hires and employs us as success coaches and oversees our work here. The Burns Memorial Fund, where we partner with them very closely for the high school bursary, among others. and the Youth Justice Society. Another partner that we had for a while was CARIA, and they've also moved in a similar direction from Big Brothers Big Sisters, but we remain very integrated with them. I'm now moving to slide number 3, which is it's AFI, All In for Youth Success Coach role and scope. And so the language on this slide I've taken from our logic model. So when we talk about the All In for Youth umbrella of supports and services, the success coach role is one element of that. And our work is primarily case management, relationship-based, accessibility, kind of like walk-in, one-stop shop support for all of the youth in our school. So we work very closely one-to-one with students in a few different ways. We are accessible to any student in our school who can kind of walk in and present an issue they might be experiencing to us. And we usually have some tool in our toolbox we can use to support them with a need or a resource or just someone to talk to about a hard time that they're going through. We also work in a more structured way with the youth who might be on our outreach lists where we've completed an intake form with them and we kind of have check-ins every once in a while. And then our caseload youth where we work very closely, and those youth are usually seeing us once a week or maybe more often, and we're doing very structured goal setting with them. Those youth tend to be more intense in terms of their needs and the services that they require for support. And so we're kind of high touch with those kids. As well, we might see higher risk kids in that category who are more likely to not complete high school, either on time or at all, and who might need some more chasing, to be frank, who, you know, they might have not historically great relationships with authority figures. And so it's on us to build a relationship with them, build connection with them, and help them to remain engaged or re-engaged in their school. We also connect youth with career opportunities, post-secondary opportunities, bursaries. The BISIT bursary at SAIT is an absolutely incredible financial resource that we use for our youth whenever possible. And actually, the email just went out, I think 2 days ago, about our youth who had received the BISIT bursary for this year. And I was absolutely thrilled that one of my kids is getting the BISIT bursary for this coming fall when he starts his architecture program at SAIT. It was a wonderful moment. We love them. We also work with the youth and their natural supports. So this is something I'm going to speak more about later as we move on, but the natural supports framework has been a game changer for us with All In for Youth. The integration, not just with the school and not just with the kids, but also with those kids' contexts, the friends with whom they might be couch surfing, the cousin who might be their closest confidant because they don't have a good relationship with their parents, or even, you know, the parents. More often than not, we have some connection with at least one of a youth's parents. Where, you know, we might be in communication about the needs at home or just what their teen is experiencing. And we try to build connection with all of those people in their life, whoever it is that's important to our kids, that they're okay with us having communication with. We want to make sure that we have a connection there because without that kind of connection, we are just a school support and we want to be more wraparound, more holistic than that. We will support our kids to build life skills and competencies so they can be successful inside and outside of the school building. Sometimes that can look like connection to resources that do more like finance work. I'm thinking about Momentum here and other services in Calgary that can help them with those life skills. McMahon Skills for Life is another that we've been in communication with in the past. And, you know, sometimes it's just connecting with their comm teacher or someone who is doing resource work with them inside the school building. We can get really creative around the life skills piece. And as I say that, we collaborate really well with the school team. So we are here, and to our students, we kind of look like a school staff. Like we have ID tags, we have keys, we have an office within the building. And we work very closely with the administrative teams and the guidance teams to make sure that everyone is on the same page and that we're not duplicating anyone's work. We never aim to replace a guidance counselor, and we really can't with the scope of our work. So we work very closely with those people, as well as maybe any district supports that they might be accessing. I'm thinking about school-based mental health here or like cultural supports of some kind. We do that with our school staff and also with any community resources they might be attached to, community partners, children's services, if maybe they're in care, shelter staff, really anyone with whom they have a connection, we can work with as well. And then for those youth who might be more engaged in the community than they are with the school, we can help them to reintegrate into, it might be our school setting, or it might be finding a more supportive and more accommodating school setting. And I have a story about that for a little later. But basically we want to minimize disruption and make sure the kids are not falling through the cracks where suddenly they're just kind of never able to re-engage in their academics. And then we also remain responsive. We have this logic model for every school that we're placed in, but all of our schools have really different needs. When we do our data collection, there's lots of site-based differences that pop up in that data collection. You know, a school might be having a lot of concern around sexual exploitation, whereas another one, the major concern is around cultural aggression and like gang violence. Yet another one might have, you know, an outbreak of like STDs going on, and it's kind of in the school community and they need some resources in dealing with that. Every site has if individual variations. And so we respond to that by seeking out training, and making sure that we can also offer training opportunities. If there's someone that maybe our agency has partnered with that we feel like our school might benefit from, we can offer that to our administration and see if that might suit their needs as well. So it's not just us gaining that competency inside of the building. So that's my big long blurb about the role. And now I'm going to move on to some of that data that I touched on briefly. If we move on to slide number 4, this is quite a dry slide in and of itself, but this is the data that had been pulled from our 2019 to 2020 annual report. And so I do expect this to look a fair bit different come summer 2021, because this was collected pretty well up to lockdown. And then I think it was, everyone did their best to collect accurate data in the context of lockdown and early pandemic. But I do think we're going to see significant variation.
Require a host, but there we go. It's another setting.
Hi, Craig. Sarah Craig is our IT wizard.
Hi, Craig.
He will try and get you set up to share your screen.
Okay, then I will pause and we can look at this beautiful chart.
Yeah, I'll be on the meeting here, so yeah.
Hi, Craig.
Craig, you know when I
Good to
can
go.
try to share.
Thanks, Howie.
Oh, I think it's going to let me share now. Okay, I'm going to give this a try and we'll see how we do. Okay, it says that I'm screen sharing. How are we? How's the view?
Yeah, we can see that. You can just hop to full screen. That's perfect. Thank you so much,
Fantastic.
Craig and Howie. And thank you, everybody, for your patience.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, I think if we're good to go, I'm going to resume. Okay, so here we are on a very beautiful chart. And as I just said, this is our 2019 to 2020 data encapsulation. What I love about this chart, this was prepared by Trellis's Evaluation Research Department, which is headed up by Nicole Jackson, and she's a data wizard. And it is just so nice to see this visual presentation of the things that are popping up most often in our work with our youth. Completely unsurprisingly, the barrier that's coming up most often for our kids is financial hardship. And my expectation for July is that we're going to see this number perhaps have spiked, but certainly have deepened. Someone else has started screen sharing. Uh-oh.
It looks like Garth. You'll see somewhere on your screen there a button that says stop sharing. Or Craig, if you're still on the call, you might be able to.
All right, I'm going to try again.
Thanks.
Okay.
I haven't been able to get to see any of the slides yet, so I was just trying.
Oh dear. So Anna and Garth can't see any of the slides at all. I'm not sure why that would be.
If
Maybe we're
you,
trying to.
Anne and Garth, in the top right-hand corner, there should be a button that says view.
Yes.
Selecting different options there might help.
Okay. Gallery view, speaker view.
Yeah. Speaker view is a good one.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Okay.
Got it?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
So Financial hardship, utterly unsurprising, is our biggest barrier for our youth in 2019, 2020. And I think we're certainly going to see this intensify. And as we move down from right to left, we see lack of positive adults, which is a very, very common one for our kids who might be pretty socially isolated or isolated amongst supportive adult connections. They might have very strong peer connections, but not so much with an adult they can feel they can turn to as a resource. Mental health issues, lack of family support, employment, and food. And these are our really frequent flyers. You'll notice it kind of plateaus from 208 to 210, from unmotivated in school, negative peer influence. But as I have said this a few times to other stakeholders, when we look at the not interested / not motivated in school, where this becomes meaningful for our kids is if you think about this barrier, it's not apathy necessarily for the kids that we're working with. It is that something in their life has occurred to kind of prevent that engagement in school. They might have really strong academic hopes and dreams, but other factors in their life, other elements of their world are kind of preventing and holding them back from fully engaging with that academic work, with that school environment. Perhaps home is too chaotic, their world is too chaotic to make school a place that they can reliably go. Perhaps when they arrive here, they are just so busy inside of their head with everything going on that they are not finding themselves able to pay attention very well. We know that toxic stress is a huge factor for our youth. For anyone who's had the inclination to do the brain story certification, I found that that was incredibly enlightening for me. I did that last year as part of finishing up my social work degree, and I'd been exposed to elements of it before, but then doing the full certification, I was like, oh, wow, this really was a light bulb moment when you think about what our youth and our young people are experiencing. And so that not interested, motivated in school is not so much the I don't care kid, because the I don't care kid isn't going to be well served by us. We are working with those students who really would love to be more successful and engage better with their schooling, but for whatever reason, whatever is in their world, it's preventing them. So I always try to contextualize that one because it's easily misinterpretable. And then, I mean, we've got some really basic needs: the finances, the employment, the food, the relationships. Lack of family support can be a big one for our youth who are living independently. Mental health issues can be a massive one as well. Especially for those youth who might be suffering in silence but not have necessarily received a diagnosis of any kind, or for whom access to the appropriate supports might be really, really difficult to get, especially when cost can be a major issue. For families who, perhaps parents are working part-time and not in receipt of benefits, that kind of coverage isn't available, and there's only so many kind of free counseling resources out there. We have seen an improvement in this landscape in the context of pandemic as well. It seems like more services than ever are offering rapid access counseling, but certainly that's been a big change that I've noticed in the service landscape in the last year. So I'm interested to see whether we see that reflected in our data for the coming year as well. So that's my beautiful chart. I'm going to move on now to, aha, I'm so happy. I don't have to necessarily say, now we're moving on to this slide. This is great. So impact. We've talked about data. We've talked about the role. What does this actually mean? So we are doing all this work. What is it resulting in? So when the 5-year annual report, I think, was completed for All In for Youth, at that time, I remember that the dropout rate had gone down. And I think it had gone down, Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, or Dixie, I think it had gone from 1 in 3 to 1 in 4.
I think it might, you might be right, it might be 1 in 4 to 1 in 5.
That also sounds right. So I remember hearing at that time, there was a major finding of the 5-year report was that the dropout rate had gone down. And so that we know that the overall mission through that big umbrella of services, that the mission of the All In for Youth program is definitely being fulfilled, and that's work that we absolutely want to continue. We are seeing more youth completing school. We are seeing more youth stay in school. And as well, that's kind of like the barest metric. We also see that in our work, the resourcing work, the creation of change, is kind of what we are spending most of our time on, connecting youth to services, getting them involved in kind of like a constellation of supports, not just one support. And we want to make sure that that change is sustainable, that it's not like kind of a one-off relationship, and that the youth and their families are empowered to remain engaged with those services. One thing that's part of the natural supports framework that is really meaningful to us is that we are working alongside, not for, our kids and families. So it's not that we are doing anything for them, we're not doing anything in place of them engaging with these services and resources. We're working alongside them to support them in engaging for themselves. Where we can kind of skill up on behalf of them is that the service landscape is constantly changing, and never more so than in this past year. The literacy that it takes to keep up with everything that happens in the service landscape is one thing that we can spend our time on that our youth and families absolutely don't have capacity for. And so when things change, when a new service comes up, I just spoke about rapid access counseling, when these kind of appear in our field of vision, we can make sure that the people that we're serving can get connected to them and remain connected to them. I'd spoken a little bit about facilitating wraparound supports and collaboration. One thing that has been absolutely impactful for us here at Trellis in the last year is the merger. So now Legacy Boys and Girls Club had served primarily youth. Our work is and remains youth-centered, but having all of the Legacy Aspen programs now as part of our agency umbrella, we are more connected to them and more networked with them than ever before. And that has resulted in some really wonderful outcomes for our families already. And so I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about some of our kids and some of our families. And so I'm going to speak just about the youth that I've worked with. And actually all of these are from the last 6 months. So when we talk about different kinds of impact, different kinds of connection, the word success is highly individual. So we are definitely trying to facilitate certain outcomes that meet our program mandate, but what the actual individual picture of success looks like is unique to that particular client. So these are Landon and Orlando are aliases. They are youth that I'm presently working with. And then there's a refugee family that I'll speak about last, but I wanted to talk about Landon first. And so Landon is a young man that I've been working with this year. And he's in grade 11, and he's an absolutely wonderful, wonderful kid who's having a really, really hard time. He suddenly lost his father about a year ago and had to move from this catchment area. So I'm in the Southwest, and he had to move all the way across the city to the Northeast to go move in with his mom. And how that manifested for Landon in semester 1 of this school year was that he really, really struggled to attend. It's about an hour and a half by bus each way to get to school every day. And he's seeing his attendance really, really fall off. I've worked very closely with his guidance counselor to try and help him engage with school and to make sure that someone is always keeping tabs on, hey, how has your attendance been? What do you need from us? We've been doing basic needs work with his family because he moved from one low-income home to another low-income home. So we've done, food bank hampers and gift cards around Christmas time when our agency has kind of like an influx of gift cards to give away and that kind of thing. Covered some of his physical health needs. We've supported him with accessing the medication that he requires that he hadn't had access to in a few years. We facilitated his first dental visit in about 5 years. All these basic needs. And at the same time, absolutely really, really struggling to engage with his academics. And so for Landon, success has looked like getting some of those basic health needs covered so that he's physically healthier and feeling better and has more capacity to do more in a day. Especially as we did online learning November and December, that constantly being at home and feeling his teeth hurt and that kind of thing was a major distractor for him, and it didn't make life any easier. And now we're kind of getting ready for him to transition to a different site. And so we know that semester 2, we're seeing more of that same real struggle to get here. And so for Landon, success is going to turn into engaging at a different site. So he's likely to transition to Discovering Choices Marlborough in the Northeast, much, much closer to home, where we also have a success coach. So our success coach, Savannah Wiest, is over there, an absolutely incredible staff member. I'm so privileged to work with her. And she is absolutely thrilled to hopefully be able to work with Landon to continue that basic needs work that we've been doing, to make sure that he still has his medication, to make sure that the rest of his cavities can get filled, to make sure that someone is connecting with him and his mother, to make sure that everything at home that they need is covered or at least being addressed. And hopefully, by removing the barrier of geography, which is something that's almost impossible to address in any other kind of programming way, he might be able to find more success academically and potentially finish his high school career there, or perhaps transition back to a more structured and kind of typical school setting, whatever works for him. But it's that connection, that continuing connection, that relentless engagement with his success coach. Even when he wasn't here for 2 weeks, I could still send him a text message on my work cell phone and say, hey, what's going on? Like, how are you? Do you need to talk? Like, let's connect. He'll have ongoing support. He's connected with a Calgary counseling staff member over there for counseling sessions, and we've been covering the fees through barrier removal, and that can continue. And he's connected with Savannah. And so even though academic success has been really hard to come by for him this year, the broader definition of success and that broader connection is still there, and hopefully that's going to facilitate kind of more academic growth. That's what I would love to see. So this is still happening as we speak. So that's my one young man. My other young man is Orlando, and Orlando couldn't be more different. He's also a young man that I've been working with since the fall. He's a grade 12 student, and he's a refugee claimant. And he and his family had come from the Middle East a few years ago. He's been finishing his education completely on time, on track at his Canadian high school, and he's getting ready for post-secondary. And so he came in to see me in the fall and said, you know, I need help. I don't know how to apply. I don't know how to pay for university. I don't know what I'm doing. I need some support. And I said, great. And so he has been just a joy of my life. He is incredibly interested in computer science, and he wants to develop software and write programs and write apps. He's been doing some of that in his computer science classes, very academically strong. And where the real complication came in with him is that his family does not yet have permanent resident status via the refugee claim process. Their case is still before the courts for consideration. And so when we were actually following through with his university applications, it quickly became apparent that he is going to be treated as an international student. And I mean, for those of us who've been to university, which I think probably almost everyone on the call has been to university, if you remember looking at the view book and seeing the chart of fees, you know that it's wildly much more expensive for international students to attend and pay their tuition fees. So even though the family has been in Canada for a number of years and has limited financial resources because parents' educational equivalencies from home countries are not recognized in the Canadian context, he was still facing these absolutely astronomical tuition fees if he wanted to stay in town. So we looked at a number of schools across the country, and in the end, he's accepted an offer from the University of Winnipeg, which is very, very happy to have him. And they, I'm not sure why, but they are able to consider him a domestic student. We had a meeting with the international student or the refugee student advisor at University of Winnipeg on Microsoft Teams, which has just been a really wonderful technology to have access to when we're trying to connect with someone in a different province. And we were able to meet all together on that platform. And I think the policy of University of Winnipeg is that if a student is a refugee claimant, they just consider them domestic by default. I'm not sure how it is that they can do that, but I'm so grateful that they are. And so he is now applying for scholarships and making sure that his grades are what they need to be, and kind of considering all the logistical aspects of what it's going to be like to move to Winnipeg and how to cover his costs of living and everything. And I get to support him in doing all that work. I help him stay organized. I help him make sure that his documents are in order. He's been looking for a part-time job to save up money for this upcoming move. And so I've been able to connect him with our employment programs at Trellis to help in the job search process, because everything that he knows is from his home country, which doesn't necessarily apply in the Canadian environment. And so my work with both of these kids are on my caseload. Both of these kids do structured goal setting with me. Their files look very similar. Some of their barriers overlap, but they couldn't be more different. And I absolutely love the variety that I get to experience in working with these people and these young men. One last story that I'll just touch on has kind of spoken to the context of our merger with Aspen. So in our new identity as Trellis, we have more connection with family programs than we've had at any other point before. Legacy Boys and Girls Club had youth programming for newcomers and refugees and permanent residents. But it was traditionally pretty just focused on, we are working directly with the youth. December, I think it was about a week before the Christmas holiday, I had a call from one of my guidance counselors who said, I am on the phone with a CBE diversity worker who is working with a family of, I think it's 6 or 7 people. And they need a whole bunch of resources and she's not sure where to connect. And so I said, you know, there might be something that I can do. Let me speak to this staff member. And so I got a call from the CBE diversity worker. And so this family of, I can't remember if it's 6 or 7, I'm gonna say 6, I feel like it's 6. One student of the 5 kids was attending our school. And there were 2 in elementary and 2 at a different high school across town. And it had become apparent in the CBE diversity workers' connection with the oldest girl who did not attend our school that the family was really, really struggling. Dad had just left the family to go back to their home country. He felt that Canada wasn't working out for him. And so it was single mom here with the 5 kids, very, very limited English. And they were also in isolation due to COVID exposure. And so they had no food. They'd been in the house. They weren't able to go get groceries. They didn't have connection really with anyone in the city. It was coming up on Christmas time. They didn't have warm coats. It was very, very cold, if you remember, at that time. I think it was like -25 or something like that. And so I connected with the diversity worker and said, okay, let me connect with our newcomer support team, which was headed up by one of our amazing staff. Her name is Robin Yon, and she oversees Building Youth Connections, and she co-oversees the Community Connections team up in the Northeast at the Genesis Center out of the 1,000 Voices. And so with one phone call, I got to pass all this on to Robin and her team. And within about a week, that family had food, clothing, school supplies, Christmas presents, language support, access to ongoing resources, help with finances, pretty much everything that they needed. And so that connection that I was able to bridge with community resources from, you know, one phone call to a school to this kind of plethora, pantheon of community resources was a really great feeling, because all I had to do was pick up the phone and a million people were there for me and there for this family. And I'm not really sure how we would have facilitated that connection otherwise. And that was a huge success story for me this past year. So as we talk about impact, and as we talk about, you know, what does the role look like on paper? The role looks like on paper, you know, a certain set of responsibilities and a certain set of, these are the outcomes that we're looking for. But in context, you know, in moment to moment, the work that we're doing, it's so individual, and impact can mean so many things and success can mean so many things. You know, no 2 days and no 2 clients are at all the same. And that's one of the things that I love most about this job and one of the things I love most about our program. So all of this to say, you know, we love that we get to do this work and we're so happy to be here. I am now going to finally move on from this slide. So a little bit more about what this year has been like. So what has the pandemic context done to us? This past, not this past academic year, the 2019 to 2020 academic year, I was not working that year. I was on maternity leave that year. And so I came back from my maternity leave in July 2020 when it felt like the world was on fire. And I said, okay, what do you want me to do? And they said, will you go into summer school? And I said, yes. So in July 2020, 2 of our success coaches, myself and another staff, we were absolutely thrilled actually to go into a summer school. We were in 2 Catholic schools. I was at Bishop O'Byrne, which I had actually worked at previously. So I had a lot of relationships in that building and it was a really good fit to go back in there. And my colleague Jasmine was at St. Francis. And so we got to kind of see, what does a COVID precaution environment in a school look like? We got to get used to face masks and everything, and, you know, incredible volumes of hand washing all the time. We just got like a sneak peek, and I was so grateful for that. But we immediately started to learn about all the things we were going to have to do differently this coming year, or this year that we're in now. It was coming at the time. And one thing that was immediately apparent was that we were going to have to be more creative than ever about how we engaged our kids and how we engaged their families, especially as we had students doing online summer school that were still technically enrolled at the school. As we moved into September and some of our students were doing hub learning, quite a few of whom have come back to in-person in semester 2, but some of whom are still doing hub learning. You know, what did that mean for our contact with them? How did we have to change our community work protocols? What would it mean if any of us had to go into isolation after an exposure? Contact tracing, all of these things that, you know, we've never had to kind of handle before. So that was a lot of preamble to the academic year and kind of seeing how it is that schools were going to function. And then what we are now seeing as we've moved into, you know, data collection and kind of beginning to take away some lessons from what the pandemic year has meant for us is that pre-existing needs in families and pre-existing needs for youth have definitely become more intense, more severe, more frequent. Some families and youth are experiencing risk and insecurity that they've never had to navigate before. When we had kids whose parents were experiencing kind of mass job losses, you know, certain industries had to shut down completely in lockdown. We had, you know, families looking for food hampers that had never considered using the food bank before. Rapid increases in financial instability. And for those students who might not be necessarily safe at home all the time, certainly sometimes that was made more precarious, more unsafe, more youth, you know, couch surfing or looking for ways to, you know, start to live independently if home was no longer a safe place to be. At the same time that these needs were deepening and broadening, we also had to observe our COVID protocols. And some of you may have heard, you know, about how schools have adapted to the challenges of the pandemic, certainly in my space. So I have, you can see just a little glimpse behind me of my office space. I have this lovely fake plant. I have this nice ambient lighting. What I don't have are textiles. I usually have soft things and pillows and fidget toys and things that people can communally touch in my office, and that is not happening this year. I have like a big storage bin of blankets and pillows and a little, if anyone knows what a Buddha board is, it's like a little canvas you can draw on with a wet paintbrush and it kind of dries and disappears. Nothing that would be touched by another person that I can't wipe down and sanitize is being used this year. And so that creates distance. It creates a physical distance that we absolutely have to observe, but it also creates an emotional distance with our kids. And how that manifested for me and what I've heard from other coaches is that we felt like we had a longer ramp up period to getting connection. It's pretty normal to go into a new school or to go into a new academic year and have to reestablish some of the relationships that you've had with kids, whether, you know, maybe they transitioned from grade 9 into grade 10 and you're meeting them for the first time, but you've heard a bit about them and maybe had like a phone call or something beforehand, or those who you might know from the previous academic year. It's just been a lot more work and a lot more emotional energy to build those connections with kids. And certainly now in semester 2, I've seen that kind of paying off. Like certainly I have more kids that I'm working with now than I did pretty much all through the fall, but it's been on a much longer timeline than in any period before then. This is something that I hope to not wrestle with to the same degree in 2021-22. And with any luck as a society, we can kind of reestablish our schools and our programs as very safe, caring, and close relationship places to be. Certainly, we will continue to adapt and to abide by what the CBE and CSSD require of us in terms of maintaining safety. And making sure that, you know, the risk is absolutely as minimal as we can make it. But I know that we've all felt the strain, we've all felt the distance, and we would certainly like to be able to work with our youth in that full capacity as we have done in previous years. So the pandemic context is not going away anytime super soon, but I certainly feel a degree of hope and optimism that might have been harder to come by a couple of months ago. All right, and this is my last content slide. So you might be looking at the title of this and thinking, saying, what the heck is a big, hairy, audacious goal? And I gotta tell you, I had not heard this term before Tuesday. And on Tuesday, I was speaking with my manager and she said, well, what's your BHAG? And I said, what the heck is a BHAG? And she said, so big, hairy, audacious goals. And so as we think about like what might be next for success coaches, our big, hairy, audacious goals, I thought this was too funny not to include. So as I've just said, you know, the intensity of need that our youth are experiencing has continued to escalate. What we might need to draw out is it just COVID? Is it just the pandemic, which kind of flattens, you know, everything that's happened inside of pandemic? But as we maybe move toward, you know, more vaccination and the lessening of intensity of what we've all been through, will we see some of these needs continue, or will we see kind of a recovery? And we're just not sure of that at this time. We've been doing way more intervention work. You know, youth are coming to us in a higher degree of risk than they ever have before. And so we found ourselves doing less of the prevention angle and way more of the intervention angle, making sure that their basic needs are met right away, that they have a safe place to go, that they have contact with, you know, a shelter if it's needed, that if a children's services report needs to go in, that we're making that report. And so it'll be fascinating to see what happens next on that one. What kind of pivoting do we need to do to be as effective in our roles as we possibly can? The quote that I have here is, the landscape of yesterday is not the landscape of today. Our program has been around since 2012. Is there something substantial in the model that needs to adapt, you know, as we move toward the 10-year anniversary of the program? Our schools have had population change over time as, you know, certain groups move in and out of the city of Calgary. One thing that was identified by my principal here at Central Memorial is that in the forecasting for our school, we are forecasted to get significantly more English language learners and newcomer students than we have historically. Central Memorial has been around for quite a long time, but the neighborhood, the demographics of the families that are living in this area are really changing, and there's more newcomers than ever. And so they're looking in to bring like bias awareness training and make sure that we are like culturally ready to serve those families as effectively as we can. We'll need to be prepared to meet more language gaps and use interpreting services and kind of build that cross-cultural connection more readily than we might have done in the past. We also maybe need to look at improving service provision. The merger, as I've talked about the merger quite a bit in this presentation, but it has really improved our ability to access different programs and access family support. How do we build that continuum of care, not just within our merged agency, but with all services in the city? How can we have that openness and that transparency and that kind of pick up the phone and see what happens kind of energy with the entire service landscape? So a way that we sometimes see this show up is that if a family or a young person is working with multiple different agencies, sometimes there's not information continuity between all of those services, and we might miss something that another agency has captured in their records that might be of real benefit to us and of benefit to the youth to have everyone on their team know about, but that kind of everyone at the same table dialogue doesn't always exist. And then finally, perhaps there would be some effectiveness to be found in moving up and down the age scale. It's a curiosity whether we might do better and more effective work by identifying families and youth that we might work with at a younger age. When I was getting ready for this presentation, Kirsten had told me about the Success in Schools program, which I honestly hadn't heard of before. And so I looked up some information about them, and it seems like those students are identified in 6th grade. And so for those students to have 6 years of support and mentorship as they go through their junior high and high school years must be incredibly powerful. So what could we support with in that capacity? What could we be doing better? And as well, what could we be doing better in a workplace setting or a post-secondary setting? When I started with All In for Youth, we had a success coach at Bow Valley College, for example. And then for a while, we had a transition coach who could work with kids who had aged out of their school settings, but still might need support in a community-based setting. So those kids might be looking for work, or they might be kind of casting about to see what their post-secondary movement might be, whether it's college or job training or university or something different. We have absolutely wonderful partners with employment programs in All In for Youth. Empower is a fantastic service that trains young people who've been out of school to work in IT And that is an absolutely incredible service. Like, they are doing amazing work. Are there youth who want to work in other capacities where we could provide some kind of like workplace support or just connection to make sure that they're thriving in those settings? All of these are open questions, and might be growth areas or may not. The person who's making the strategic decisions is not me, but they are definitely things that have been on my mind as I've been in this program for a number of years. So I'm going to move on from this slide. And I just want to once again say thank you so much for your time. I know I've spoken a lot at you in the last 20 minutes, and I'm excited to hear any questions or feedback that you have for me. Thank you so much for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was a fantastic presentation. And I think I can speak on behalf of everybody when I say it makes me feel really hopeful and comforted to have someone like you working with youth who is so passionate and committed. That's really obvious in your tone of voice and the way you speak about your work. So thank you for everything that you do for the community. There are some really great questions in the chat, so we'll make sure we get to all of them if we can. I'll group a few together that are similar. So the first question for you is, how are students identified to participate in the program? Do school counselors identify students? And is there an age limit?
So the question of identification, there's a number of pathways by which students can come to us. Students can self-refer. So I have, again, my lovely office, and I have this door out to the hallway. A student can just come by and knock on the door and say, hey, I'm dealing with a thing. Can I get some support from you? And usually it's a yes. It's kind of a yes and. It's a yes and let's talk to your guidance counselor. Hey, do your teachers know that you're going through this thing and this is disrupting your ability to attend or complete your work on time? It's never just a yes from me. It's like yes and let's liaise with your school team. As a follow-up, a lot of my referrals and a lot of our referrals as success coaches come through the school guidance team. I have a meeting with my guidance staff every single week or every 2 weeks, depending on kind of what's going on in the school, and they identify students who might need some support because they are working very, very closely with their particular kind of cohort of students, whether they organize it by grade or by alphabet, which depending on which school I've been in, they do it in both ways. But they are absolutely that front line of support. I've also sometimes had students identified by their classroom teacher, if that's the person that student is confiding in, or an educational assistant, a librarian, a resource teacher, a community member, a parent. Yeah, there's any number of ways in which a student might come to us. Regardless though, I'm going to, when I receive a referral, whether it's a self-referral or any kind of other referral, I will make sure that I connect with my school team to make sure that I'm not going to duplicate any work that anyone else is doing and to see to whom else they might be connected. If a student has been here for a couple of years, they probably have a stronger relationship with their guidance counselor or another person in the building than they might with me at the present time, because I've only been here since September. So I want to do my due diligence and make sure that I have at least a brief picture of that kid's context. Was there an element of that? Oh, did we talk about age limit?
Age limit.
So technically there's not really an age limit. The student needs to be enrolled at the school where their success coach is based. So I can't work with a student who's enrolled elsewhere. Our mandate's really, really clear about that one, which is part of the reason that I'm so thrilled that my young man Landon is probably going to be on track to go to DC Marlborough, because I can just kind of seamlessly hand his file to our coach Savannah over there. Whereas if he were going to attend DC downtown, we don't have a coach there, and I would unfortunately have to close the file. I could participate in a transition meeting and make sure that whoever's going to be his support person at that environment is aware of what's gone on, but they wouldn't receive the full gamut of information that's contained in his file due to privacy reasons.
Thanks, Sarah. There's a question about what schools do you work with? And so I know we also have Dixie on the call. All In for Youth as an initiative is in, I believe, over 20 schools in Calgary right now. Sarah, you mentioned you're with Central Memorial and you've been with a few schools over your time.
Yep. So I know Dixie probably has access to the full list. We don't have success coaches in all of our schools, but I'm at Central. I have been at Bishop McNally. I have been at Bishop O'Byrne, which no longer has a coach, but they do have other elements of the All In for Youth program. There are 11 success coaches at the moment, but the program has at least tendrils in quite a lot of schools. Dixie, do you want to follow up on that one?
I was just typing. that I can, because it's such a long list, Kristen, I can send you a list and you could maybe share that out widely.
Yeah, that sounds good. Or if you have it, you can just pop it in the chat as well. Thanks, Dixie. There's a few questions, Sarah, about what is the capacity for the program? You know, how many students are in it now? What is your caseload? What's a typical caseload? How many students should be in the program? You mentioned there's 11 success coaches, but I'm sure if we had funding, we'd have a success coach in every school, right?
Oh yeah, that's the ideal. Yeah, so when I started with the Ellen for Youth program, I was told that I started out in a very large volume, high capacity high school. Bishop McNally is a really high volume kind of site. That I believe they were one of the first high schools in the city. I think they were part of the first 5 to get Ellen for Youth when it initially started up. And so the kids there have a really strong, the kids and the staff have a really strong understanding of what the success coach is there to do. And so they're really not shy about walking in and saying, hey, I need this thing. And so my numbers there were massive. I usually had about 10 to 15 kids on my caseload at any given time, and then dozens and dozens and dozens of kids on my outreach list where it was less structured. I would still see them relatively frequently every couple of weeks, but it would be them coming to me, not me necessarily chasing them quite so much. On the opposite end of the spectrum, when I started at Bishop O'Byrne, I was there for 1 year and I was the first success coach they had ever had. And there was not as much visibility, just it was a new role for them. They were not used to it. And so I was putting a lot of energy into engagement and trying to make connections, and that all went really well. But that didn't necessarily show up in the numbers. So I think I had a caseload of about 5 at that site, and then maybe a dozen more that I was working with on outreach. I mean, really the thing that you need there is time to build that relationship and, facilitate those connections with the community, the school community and the wider community. And that just kind of takes time, and it's a process. Central has been an absolutely amazing place to be. I've really enjoyed my time here. Presently, I have about 5 or 6 kids on caseload and quite a few on outreach, some of whom I have plans to intake with. I'm doing a new caseload intake next week, for example. And those numbers this year are really heavily influenced by the pandemic context, because it's really hard to build connection with a kid when suddenly they're in isolation for 2 weeks at a time. So in conversations with my managers, and we've all kind of had this amongst the success coaches, we know that our numbers as we move out of the pandemic probably will go up. And I mean, what a good number looks like is also a very site-based consideration. There are neighborhoods that we are in that are higher need than others. There are schools we are in that have had success coaches for a much longer time and are much more used to having them around and have that higher visibility and literacy of what the role is. There are cohort effects year over year. If there's a particular class of kids that is inundated with resources, they might be less likely to engage, or if they feel a scarcity, might be much more likely to engage. In terms of hard data, I think we usually still shoot for that 15 on caseload ideal, but there's not really a ceiling. The total number of students we can work with we don't have a cap. We never cut off a kid because, oh, we're too busy. That's not the model. That's not the goal. We are trying to build connection. We are trying to build relationship, and just cutting off a kid bluntly because I don't have time to deal with you is really not a good move. And I don't think you would find any of us ever doing that.
Thank you. Is there a one-stop shop to keep up with the ever-changing system of supports and services? I know I would do a plug for 211, a United Way initiative. But Sarah, do you have any input on that as well from your perspective?
I would also plug 211. I would also plug Inform Alberta because I think they're pretty good about updating their website and making sure that their information is current. Sometimes it's just picking up the phone and calling an agency and saying, hey, I see your website says you have this program. Is that true? Can you tell me about the intake process? I would love a more centralized repository of every service in the city. I would love that. If anyone wants to take that on a special project, you have my full blessing.
Sounds good. Okay, measurement of success is naturally very individualistic. Do you have some way of evaluating program success?
Yeah, absolutely. So the United Way annual report about All In for Youth, I actually just looked at the other day as I was building my slide deck. That will tell you more about the success of the program as a whole. When it comes to success, as it relates to the work of the success coaches, we gather data every month in a retrospective report. So we put that out at the start of every month for the month previously, and it kind of captures the work that we're doing with all of our kids. And then once a year, we write our success coach report, which includes like anecdotes about success stories with our youth, where there's kind of that individuality. We also do satisfaction surveys with our young people twice a year. You know, how are they feeling about the work that we've done together? Do they feel like they have a safe person to come to in the school? Do they feel like their attendance has improved? And actually, just for the first time in January, we did parent surveys. So I talked a lot about in that presentation about, you know, more engagement with the families than ever before. And so Nicole Jackson, our wonderful research and evaluation guru, designed a parent survey to capture some data from some of our natural supports, and which was pretty positive. We had just a small group who was surveyed, but they were very happy with the work that they were doing. And so all of those pockets of data taken together can tell us about program success. And then the All In for Youth annual report from United Way will tell you more about the broader dome of services and whether those are being as effective as they ought to be. And that's all. It's publicly accessible on the United Way website.
Yes, thank you. I see Dixie just posted the listing of all the schools in the chat for those who are curious. Jenna also added to sort of the previous question in terms of where do people find all the information that they need, that the city social workers are also an amazing wealth of information and support for services. That's a really exciting sweet spot for us where community hubs and All In for Youth intersect in terms of, you know, these are United Way's 2 initiatives really focused on root causes and long-term sustainable social change. And so it's really exciting for us. We have, you know, weekly meetings where our hubs team and our AFI team come together and chat really kind of on the ground style about the work going on and how they can help influence and kind of support each other as well. So it's great. The last question that I see here, unless a new one gets posted, is your relationship stronger with CBE or the Catholic Board? Is it equally distributed?
I don't think I would characterize either relationship as like necessarily stronger. I think they're both quite strong. I've worked now in both districts, and I wouldn't say I've noticed like a difference in the quality of relationship. Dixie, at a program level, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Again, I think I'm going to reiterate what Sarah, you know, has just commented. We have a pretty strong relationship with both school districts. I wouldn't say that one is stronger over the other. They're both incredibly supportive of all of our All In for Youth programs, especially our success coaches. They've been incredible partners since the inception of All In for Youth up until today, to this point, and I imagine as we continue forward with All In for Youth.
Thanks, Dixie, that's great. A couple more questions, Sarah, thanks. Do all students have the technology they're required to stay connected with the coaches?
That's been a really pivotal issue this year, especially as we had students suddenly going into lockdown about a year ago. And we've had some really great support from a few different programs. I know that the Calgary Flames Foundation had connected a lot of students with Chromebooks in the spring. I believe United Way also had a hand in that. I think I remember Karen Young talking about that at the president's panel, that they had purchased quite a number of assistive devices to help students get connected. Craig Barabash, who is our United Way liaison, had made sure that our schools were entirely aware of the Tell Us Internet for Good program and initiative, which is connecting families who might not otherwise to be able to afford it with low-cost internet. And one support that our coaches have been able to tap into in the last little while was that we received a grant from HSBC. We were able to purchase some Chromebooks for kids who still, for whatever reason, didn't have access. And We also use Alberta Computers for Schools as a resource to make sure that kids get technology. So there are definitely still gaps that exist, but I think there's more awareness of that as a barrier now more than ever.
Awesome, thank you. Marnie is wondering, how could Rotary help this program?
That is an absolutely incredible question. And so when I was thinking about the Stay in Schools program, which I've just learned about, and I was thinking about, where do we want to expand, it would be wonderful to see the continued health and growth of this program. It would be wonderful to integrate more with other services and figure out better and more effective and more creative ways to collaborate. I don't have a concrete answer on this one, just because in my position as a frontline worker, I'm not usually the one at the decision-making table, but I know I'd be open to continued conversations with whatever ideas are coming forward, or if there's needs that are being identified at the program design level. We'd love to keep this relationship open.
Thank you. We'll take the last question in the chat here, and then I'm going to pass it over to Howie to make sure that we have some time for group discussion as well to close this out. So Sarah, are CPS or social workers involved?
So we do have relationships with our youth social workers if they have children's services status. I'm not sure if Margaret means CFS social workers, like in children's services, as that connection. And certainly for our youth who might be living in group homes or might have status, family enhancement status or something like that, we can definitely liaise with their workers. There's a youth I'm connected with presently who there's a whole team around the table for him, for me, his guidance counselor. There's some mental health resources involved. There is a CFS staff involved. And so we all get to share information together and make sure that youth and his family are connected with what they need and being served well. CPS, we have our wonderful school resource officers that we can connect with, and also to help our youth connect with them if there's some fear there. Sometimes youth have a lot of nerves and fear and apprehension in approaching our school resource officers, and we can help them to connect in that way. When I've had youth who might be experiencing a dangerous or violent situation, it's been really great to have strong relationships with our SRO. Because I might come into information that's going to affect their safety that CPS might need to know. And one thing I didn't speak about in the presentation is that the limits to confidentiality that are part of my program are pretty well the same as the ones the guidance counselors have. So we, as a school-ish staff, we have the same duty of care that teachers and guidance counselors do. So if we come into information that's going to directly affect a youth's safety and well-being, we are duty bound to report it to the appropriate authorities, whether that's I need to let their guidance counselor know, or I need to make a children's services call, or hey, I need to contact CPS or some other authority that absolutely needs to know that information, because we want to make sure that they're safe. So I hope that addresses the question.
Thank you, Sarah. I wonder, Kelly, I hate to put you on the spot, so no worries, but I wondered if you wanted to add anything from your CPS lens.
To be honest with you, I haven't heard of this program at all, and I'm really interested in all the stuff that you've said, Sarah. And I do want to connect with my staff sergeant tomorrow and ask about this, because all of the resources that you're seeing, and when you're talking about kids that are a little bit scared to connect with the police officers in the schools. The other thing that we have is we do have our support dogs in our office. And if you ever find that there are kids that are really having some mental health issues, or they need the assistance. I know we've had several cases where students have been really scared to take their exams, and it's just caused anxiety and just incredible amount of pressure for them. And we've brought the dogs in, and the dog laid down by the student, and she laid on the floor and was able to do her, a high school English exam without, the stress. So we do that is something that I think is important, is the resources that you can provide, Sarah, to help connect our police officers with the students. I think that's an important relationship.
Yeah, I'm really privileged this year in that the SRO who's at Central this year is actually someone that I've worked with before at Bishop McNally, Art Zabo, and he's just the nicest man in the world. And that is, it's such a blessing. I was so happy to see his face when I got there. I was like, oh my gosh, it's you. Best thing.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kelly and Sarah. I mean, this is what these meetings are all about, right? Is making connections and sharing information and really ultimately just better serving the youth and the communities that we all seek to support. Okay, well, Sarah, we can't thank you enough. You're truly a wealth of knowledge, so passionate about what you do. Thank you again for speaking today. I see claps from the crowd. Truly, truly thank you for the time. Thank you for the work that you do with the students in Calgary. And I will pass it over to Howie.
All right, I will say my goodbyes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Just before you run off, I'd just like to say thank you on behalf of Rotary as well. You've given us lots of food for thought. And just to highlight some of the connections I see coming, we have a number of programs, RILA, Ripen, Interact, Rotaract, our Tom Jackson Stay in School program, our regular Stay in School program, and a number of the other clubs put on breakfasts and barbecues for their schools. There's Crime Not to Read programs that are sponsored by Rotarians. The Calgary Reads program is closely affiliated with us. So there's lots of connections. And I find that this is what the community, for me, the biggest win is the community hubs is all about building these connections and collaborations. So for part of our success with the community hubs in particular, when you were talking about making one call to north of McKnight to the Genesis Center up there, I mean, that just is a sure sign that we've moved in the right direction in supporting the Community Hubs program, and all of the connections are being built. So thank you so much. And,
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Howie. It was an absolute pleasure to be here. All right, have a good night, everybody.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye.
So everyone's still welcome to stay, and usually in this part of the, I think we've still got 29 of us here. So we're going to run a little bit short on time, but I just kind of throw it open to see if anybody has any thoughts or discussions about where, about the benefits of the sessions that we're hearing, the education pieces we get, or how we might work more collaboratively as clubs in Calgary on some of these programs as we learn more about what we're doing. And I might ask Christine, I just saw blanked herself out there, but she's been pretty knowledgeable in this whole, well, on the collaboration piece, number one, across the district, and number two, I know you'd worked hard at building some of these youth programs. And the third thing I'd say, I know you were working close with Haider Hassan, and I learned more about the Gateway Project. It ties into a lot of what was talked about today as well. So
yeah, what Haider presented last time, I mean, the points that Haider made in his presentation, along with this program that Sarah just presented, there's a lot of links together with that. And there's links to what we offer too in youth services. Right now, of course, this has been the strange year with COVID. We've had to reschedule or postpone a lot of the youth programs because they're held in camps, week-long camps, 4 or 5 day camps and that kind of thing. But they will continue. They will continue. There's no doubt in my mind. Also, we're working on another program right now for financial and career management for young leaders. For youth, like for teens and young adults. So we're working on that right now. We're going to be doing a pilot on that in May. Stay tuned for that one. We see a lot of gaps in those kind of things with young people as well. So yeah, I see some clear linkages. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I have to take this call. My dad is not well, so I got a call, so I got to go. Sorry.
okay, thanks. No, thanks so much, Christine. Any other?
I have some comments, Howie, or some questions.
Sure. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, the program is, obviously very, very good and substantial, and it's a rehabilitation program for kids, but it isn't getting at the really difficult kids, the kids that are really potential for causing problems or getting in trouble with the police or getting in problems with drugs. And I was just wondering, I'm not very, very familiar with what's going on. Are there any harm reduction centers for youth in Calgary where kids can just come and hang out and, where there isn't a big push towards rehabilitation?
I think that's a great question, Garth. And from my world of having worked with the YMCA and on the Calgary Police Commission, and with what I see here, I see lots of amazing connections, but as we talk about, we're quite siloed. So as Kelly mentioned, she hadn't heard about this program, and she's been actively involved with the CYSS part of the program. The service has some wonderful programs that I recall from my days in the commission, with programs like YARD and MAST, and then there's an integrated school support program. There's programs like Power Play that they have to introduce officers to the community. So Kelly, do you mind if we put you on the spot? And did you have any thoughts about Garth's comments? But we do seem to have silos. We have programs for kids through the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Clubs for kids where maybe are just poor or need a hand up. The service, and through the service and the Police Foundation, there's a number of sponsored programs, and they're all looking for ways to collaborate more together, which is why we're so pleased to have people like Kelly join us today. And we've had Calgary Reads and Brown Bagging for Calgary Kids attend our meetings. But Kelly, any thoughts?
You know what, you make, that is a good question as far as like, where can these kids go? We do have, like I said, we work our MAST and YARD programs. They do work specifically with kids, but they're all referred, right? So what about those kids that aren't referred? We are working with our areas, our units within the service to try to identify kids that are also at risk. Example, siblings of kids that we've identified that are at risk, and trying to reach out to them as well. But and I apologize because I came here in September, so I'm still learning some of the programs, but I don't know of, other than the ones like the YMCA, different programs that they can go to, like independent kind of drop-in sessions or stuff like that. I'm not quite familiar on that stuff.
So just one last quick comment. I'll make a shameless plug here for the CPS as well, because we've talked a lot about defunding the police, and the police should be more involved in beyond law enforcement. And I think Kelly's presence here today, and I had an earlier discussion with Deputy Chief McClellan earlier this week, and our program is really rich, and I think our service is really rich and probably leads the world, in my opinion, on crime prevention and community relationship programs, and we're just not aware of them. So it's a great question, Garth, and I think it's something that we need to work at more at getting out, get the story out there. But when you see programs like Source for homeless people and ISSP for elementary kids, it's pretty amazing what we do here before we go on that. But the other person I'd like to get their views on it, who's worked in kind of youth who need help and just understanding these organizations, is Dan Doherty, who's the past chair of Hull Services. And I think Dan has a lot of experience in that area, and I know he's working quite closely with the South Sudanese community right now. So Dan, any comments or thoughts?
I'm also on Hyder's board.
Oh, right. Yep.
Yeah, so
tell him I gave him a plug today. So
lots of connectivity there. I think that what you're seeing is we keep asking, why aren't the organizations collaborating more? And I think when we allow them in the door and we have the dialogue, we see the really creative ways that they are collaborating. And you know, a lot of the resources, you know, Hull and Boys and Girls Club, or now Trellis, and they've all got their pods. You know, I saw on here, Kristen put in about the hubs in the community living rooms. So there's a lot of these programs are going and moving forward. The real problem, I think Kelly maybe mentioned it, is that the people that are in the system are getting resourced very, very well. The problem is a lot of these young adults don't know how to access the system, or they've had an incredibly difficult time with the system. You know, you can look at the South Sudanese community, and they've got great difficulty with the police service. Partly, there's lots of reasons why it's there, but there's a distrust there. There's some of the language that they speak, they don't understand what's going on. We've had that dialogue before. So programs that, you know, that are really incredibly creative, like the Gateway, that Hyder's really trying to transform that connectivity, is something that's really, really required. So we were through that kind of system program with Hull back in the 90s when Dinning and Klein were doing all their cuts. And Hull is the largest provider of social services in Southern Alberta. And we tried to do a lot of collaboration, and we did collaborate. There were groups that just didn't survive. So it's not very dissimilar to today. But what happens is, as you get closer to when things are getting normalized again, people get back into their niches and make it difficult. So guess where I'm going long term here, to cut this short, is that I think as a group here, the hub, community hub, is an incredible vehicle or window into some of these opportunities. But I think that when we had Hyder sitting in the room, and we have him talking about the Gateway program, that should be part of our hub. That we should be working together with him and finding creative ways to finance and do this. You know, there's lots of activity in behind that. I know Hyder shared with his activity on the Premier's Council and the strategic planning that he's doing there. Rotary's definitely at the table. Mary Turner, our district governor, there was some for the COVID response things. Rotary's at the table. It's just a matter of how do we shoot the puck, right? And how do we get more engaged in things? And so I would strongly encourage, especially the multiple clubs that are in here, that if you're willing and open to it, I'd facilitate another chat with Hyder for the clubs to talk about how Rotary can help and engage and really get that connectivity happening. But that would be kind of my advice, because we're so close as a team. You know, Howie, I think the last number of meetings you've had have been phenomenal, pulling us together and pulling the community in. You know, that's something Franco has talked a lot about having the people we want to serve in the room beside us, and we have them with a voice at the table. And I think you're starting to do that. And I think there's some ways that we can do it and really have an impact if we come together.
Well, thanks, Dan. And I did shoot an email off to Hyder today on exactly what you're talking about, asking him about the Gateway. So great. Gary, go ahead.
So I'll probably be the one following up with you on that, Howie. So maybe you and I can connect after.
Okay.
Howie, just another thought. It seems to me that a lot of our members belong to churches and so on, and the churches are involved. They have after-school programs and things like that. And maybe our members need to know more about Gateway, and so that the church itself can link into Gateway.
Yeah, and the more our members know about this, the more they can connect the churches into some of these resources. I know Franco would have a story about connecting churches to resources to customers, right, Franco, with your food hamper program there. So, and that's really part of the hub project, is really building the collaborations and networks and the connections.
One of the concerns that I have is that, you know, I think sounds like the whole approach taken in the city towards youth is one of rehabilitation. And we want to get these kids through school and get them get them settled and so on. But there doesn't seem to be a place for a program for kids that are never really going to make it, and this is where a harm reduction program can come into the picture. And even just a tiny portion of the approach could be towards harm reduction, could make a huge difference to a lot of kids that are not going to make it in our system. And, there's no point in, there's always a point in trying to help people rehabilitate, but when you put your total focus on that, then you're simply going to miss a whole pile of young people who just won't respond to that. I know I may be stepping over the bounds here, because I know the overwhelmingly point of view is that what we're about is trying to fix kids, get them set for life one way or another, so they can be contributors to society. But there's a whole undercurrent of kids that are not going to be that way, or not going to make it, but they still deserve to be part of our city, and they're going to be part of our city, and they need help as well. They need to have a place where they can go, where they can congregate with other kids like themselves, and where there can be somebody there to talk to about some of their problems and so on. So anyway, I just throw that out.
I think you're bang on, Garth, and I think that a lot of the programs today, though, however, and when you talk about the gateway and the connectivity, it's about survival. And I've never, I love this city. I grew up in this city, but I've never seen this city as fractured as I see it today. And the issues of the amount of population that's living at or below the poverty line, that have no access to food stability is probably the lowest it's ever been. The access to healthcare and services is low, partly because they don't know how and they don't have those kinds of access. So we are having those kinds of discussions, and we need to have more of them. And what the school board, if you want to go back, they did a great disservice to a lot of the students you're talking about when they got rid of all the vocational programs around the city. So
maybe we're just about at the end of our time here. So what I'd like to do perhaps is, if it's okay, I'll give Franco the last word here. Franco, if I can impose on you that. For those of you who don't know Franco, he spent his career working with, I think, the kinds of situations you're describing, Garth, as a CEO of many YMCAs, and also in his last bit with Vibrant Communities Calgary. He spent quite a bit of time thinking about these things. So Franco, any last words of advice, and then we can sign off. And first words of advice as we move forward. So sorry about that.
Folks, for me, I think the only way we're going to solve in all of these things, we got to bring the stakeholders together. The best experiences, the one we've been talking about all this meeting tonight, is about high school completion rates, really. And I put a thing in the because I looked at this back 4 or 5, 6 years ago in Cincinnati, where the stakeholders came together and said, we're going to go from 67% completion rates to 98% in 7 years. And then they put they brought business, they brought social service clubs like us, they brought the boards of education and said, how are we going to do this? And at the end of the day, because we're spending already billions of dollars, billions right now, to achieve that as a community and as a province. So I think the question I think we have is we got to figure this out. In what part can Rotary play? And this is just focusing right now on what we were talking about this afternoon. But it really is, we've got to figure this out and even for us as Rotary clubs, and I know I've said this lots of times, as a Rotarian, 25-year plus Rotarian, we got to get more inter-club and greater, and because we can't do everything, but where can we put our shoulders to the wheel? So I think if we can all go away tonight saying, given what our club is doing, how can we do it better in conjunction with other clubs and with the community? I think that's my mantra these days, and we're struggling with it certainly in our own club. We're trying to move that way, at the downtown club, but I think that's the challenge we've got. And let's use the learnings from the community hubs of the last 3 or 4 years to say, how can we make that happen? Back to you, Howie.
So Howie, I noticed that Kelly had her hand up. I thought she might have had a comment.
Sure. Oh, I missed that. Kelly, did you have a comment? Or?
Well, I didn't want to keep you guys, I didn't want to keep everybody, but I just wanted to let you know that I think, like, I don't know if you've noticed in the website or anything, but we're starting a youth advisory board at Calgary Police Service. And we're really excited about this because this is our opportunity to get the youth to give us feedback, to help bring concerns, issues, challenges that they're facing in the community, whether it is, how Calgary Police Service is connecting with them. Are we communicating with them? Are we providing equal and diverse and inclusive responses to them? And another question that kind of brings this conversation to light is that I'd like to ask them is, do you feel that we do a good enough job connecting with them as far as resources, and what else can we do better? We're excited to get the feedback that will help guide us in connecting those resources to help the youth develop and to, again, make that relationship grow so that their voice is heard and it's not just us trying to tell them what we think they need. So we're very, very excited about it. And I just wanted to put a plug in there that this conversation helps bring that context for me to ask them, what are you missing in the community that we are not providing for you?
Well, that's terrific to hear. That
It's great.
And I think, Garth, does that go along the theme of what you're kind of looking for in the general direction, I think, is what you're hoping. So there is some opportunities for us maybe to collaborate some more with the service on this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I guess we're just past 5:30, so I'll have to adjourn this meeting. If you have any other questions or comments, please send them to me and I'll try and put them together and get them back out and turned around. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.